Marcus Chen had seen plenty of strange things during his 15 years working the Outer Rim salvage routes, but nothing quite like the creature huddled in the corner of the abandoned space station's cargo bay. The station itself was a relic from the Terran-Kalari trade wars, drifting silent and dark through the Vega system's asteroid belt. Most salvagers avoided these old military outposts. Too many booby traps, too many ghosts. But Marcus had always been different. Where others saw danger, he saw opportunity. Where others saw junk, he found treasure. And where others would have seen a monster, Marcus saw something else entirely. The creature was massive, easily 20 feet from snout to tail, with scales that shimmered like black oil under his helmet's work lights. Its wings were folded tight against its body, and what looked like tears had dried in crystalline trails down its elongated face. The locals in this sector called them Draknari, space dragons, though Marcus had never believed the stories. Everyone knew they were just myths, scary tales to keep rookie pilots from venturing too far into unexplored space. Yet here one was, very real and very much alive. "Easy there," Marcus said softly, setting down his plasma cutter and raising his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. His translator device crackled to life, attempting to process the creature's low, mournful sounds into something approaching language. The Draknari's head lifted slightly, revealing eyes like molten gold that seemed far too intelligent for any mere animal. Those eyes were filled with a sadness so profound that Marcus felt it like a physical weight in his chest. The translator finally managed a few words. "Leave. Please, no more." Marcus had spent enough time in space to recognize grief when he saw it, regardless of the species. The creature wasn't aggressive or territorial. It was heartbroken. "I'm not here to hurt you," Marcus said, keeping his voice gentle. "My name is Marcus. What's yours?" The creature regarded him for a long moment, then made a sound that the translator rendered as Zathara. The name came out broken, like the Draknari could barely bring itself to speak it. Marcus noticed the shackle marks around Zathara's ankles, the scoring on the station walls that suggested a violent struggle, and the way the creature flinched whenever a piece of debris shifted in the corridor outside. Someone had imprisoned this being here, and recently. "The people who did this to you," Marcus said carefully, "are they coming back?" Zathara's massive head shook slowly. More translated words emerged. "Gone. All gone. Left me to die." The pieces clicked together in Marcus's mind. This wasn't just any abandoned station. It was a smuggling operation. And Zathara hadn't been cargo. Based on the advanced computer terminals and the neural interface crown discarded in the corner, the Draknari had been forced to work here. Probably as a navigator, since the Draknari were rumored to have an innate ability to sense hyperspace currents. When whatever operation this was had shut down, they'd simply abandoned their employee. "You've been alone here for a while, haven't you?" Marcus asked. The translation was unnecessary this time. The hollow look in those golden eyes told the whole story. Marcus made a decision that his practical salvager's brain told him was completely insane. "Would you like to come with me?" Zathara's head jerked up in surprise. "Why?" It was Marcus's turn to pause. Why indeed? He could give practical reasons. Draknari were valuable. Their navigation abilities alone could make him rich. He could talk about the scientific discovery, the fame that would come from being the first human to make peaceful contact with a living Draknari. But looking into those grief-stricken eyes, Marcus found himself telling a different truth. Because no one should have to be alone like this. The simple honesty of the statement seemed to reach something deep inside Zathara. The creature's posture shifted slightly, a fraction less defensive. "Your ship," Zathara said slowly. "It is small?" Marcus grinned. "The Wanderer's heart is plenty big enough for both of us. She's built for long hauls and longer silences. Plus, I could use the company. For the first time since he'd found the creature, something that might have been hope flickered in those golden eyes. It took 3 days to get Zethra safely aboard Marcus's ship. The Draknari was weak from hunger and neglect, and moving such a large creature through the station's corridors required careful planning. Marcus used his salvage equipment to create a makeshift transport sled, working slowly and patiently while Zethara watched his every move. The creature's wariness was understandable. Humans, Marcus learned, had a complicated reputation in this part of the galaxy. Most species saw them as aggressive, unpredictable, and dangerously individualistic. The few human traders who ventured into Draknari space were usually looking for profit, not friendship. "You're kind," Zethara said during one of their rest breaks. "They take what they want." Marcus considered this while adjusting the anti-grav generators under the transport sled. "Some do," he admitted, "but not all of us. My father used to say that the measure of a person isn't what they can take, but what they choose to give." The translator struggled with some of the nuances, but Zethara seemed to understand the sentiment. "Your father was wise? He was a good man," Marcus said simply. "He taught me that everyone deserves kindness, no matter how different they might seem." Once aboard the Wanderer's Heart, Marcus set about making his unexpected passenger comfortable. The ship's cargo bay was spacious enough for Zethara to stretch out properly, and Marcus rigged up additional heating units to keep the area warm. Draknari, he discovered, were cold-blooded and suffered in the chilly recycled air that humans preferred. The bigger challenge was food. Zethara's species required a very specific type of mineral-rich algae that grew only in certain stellar conditions. Marcus's emergency rations weren't suitable, and they were 3 days from the nearest trading post. "I will manage," Zethara said when Marcus expressed his concern. But the Draknari's already weakened condition was visibly deteriorating. Marcus spent that first night poring over his star charts and botanical databases, looking for alternatives. Finally, in a cross-reference between xenobiology texts and his ship's mineral processing capabilities, he found a possible solution. The next morning, he presented Zethara with a bowl of greenish paste that he'd synthesized using his ship's recycling systems and some creative chemistry with his welding supplies. Zethara sniffed the mixture suspiciously. "This smells wrong." "Trust me," Marcus said. "I know it's not exactly what you're used to, but it should have all the nutrients you need." The Draknari took a tentative bite, then another. The effect was almost immediate, color returning to the creature's scales, strength flowing back into those massive limbs. "How?" Zethara asked, staring at the bowl in amazement. Marcus scratched his head, suddenly embarrassed. "I just figured it out, looked at what you needed and worked backwards from what I had available. It's not that complicated." But the look in Zethara's eyes suggested it was very complicated indeed. In Draknari society, Marcus would later learn, such improvisation and adaptability were considered almost miraculous abilities. Their own culture valued precision and tradition over innovation. As the days passed and they traveled toward the trading post at Kepler Station, Marcus and Zethara began to develop something resembling friendship. The Draknari proved to be intelligent and well-educated, with knowledge spanning multiple fields of science and philosophy. In return, Marcus shared stories of human culture and his own experiences as a salvager. "You have no clan," Zethara observed during one of their conversations. "No hierarchy. How do you know your place?" Marcus laughed. "I guess I make my own place. That's kind of the human way. We don't wait for someone to tell us where we belong." This concept seemed to fascinate Zethara. Draknari society was built on rigid social structures and ancient traditions. The idea of an individual choosing their own path was both alien and intriguing. "Your species is very young," Zethara said thoughtfully, "yet you adapt so quickly. We Draknari have existed for millions of years, but we change very slowly. Maybe that's why you survive so long, Marcus suggested. Steady and reliable isn't a bad way to be. Perhaps. But it did not protect us from those who would enslave us. The bitterness in that statement hung heavy in the recycled air. Marcus was beginning to understand that Zathara's story was part of a much larger tragedy. The Draknari weren't just rare. They were dying out, their populations scattered and enslaved by other species who valued their navigational abilities more than their lives. At Kepler Station, Marcus faced his first real test of his commitment to his new companion. The station administrator, a Rigelian named Voss, immediately began asking pointed questions about Zathara's status. Draknari are protected under Galactic Conservation Protocol 7, Voss said, his tentacles writhing with bureaucratic excitement. You'll need to register the creature with the authorities and demonstrate proper containment facilities. Zathara isn't a creature, Marcus said firmly, and I'm not keeping him contained. He's a free being who chose to travel with me. Voss's eye stalks swiveled to stare at Marcus in disbelief. Chose? These creatures don't make choices. They're valuable for their navigation abilities, nothing more. If you can't prove legal ownership, I'll have to confiscate it for proper placement. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest, but before he could respond, Zathara spoke up from behind him. The Draknari had insisted on coming to the meeting, despite Marcus's concerns about the reaction they might face. I choose to remain with Marcus Chen, Zathara said. The ship's external speakers carrying his translated words through the administrator's office. He has shown me kindness when no one else would. By the ancient laws of sanctuary, I claim him as my guardian. Voss's eye stalks nearly tied themselves in knots. The sanctuary laws haven't been invoked in over 2 centuries, and certainly never by a Draknari choosing a human guardian. The laws exist, Zathara said calmly. I invoke them now. Marcus wasn't sure what exactly was happening, but he recognized the importance of the moment. I accept, he said solemnly. The bureaucratic implications of this declaration would take months to fully unravel. But the immediate effect was clear. Zathara was legally under Marcus's protection, and anyone who wanted to harm the Draknari would have to go through him first. As they left Kepler Station together, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken a dramatic turn. He'd started this journey as a simple salvager looking for scrap metal. Now he found himself the guardian of what might be one of the last free Draknari in the galaxy. Thank you, Zathara said, as they settled in for the journey to their next destination. I had forgotten what it felt like to choose my own path. Marcus smiled, checking their course settings. Where do you want to go? For the first time since they'd met, Zathara's golden eyes held something other than sadness. Forward, the Draknari said simply. Just forward. As the Wanderer's heart jumped into hyperspace, carrying its unlikely crew toward an uncertain future. Neither Marcus nor Zathara could have imagined the forces their partnership would set in motion, or the ancient prophecy they had just unknowingly begun to fulfill. 3 weeks after leaving Kepler Station, Marcus began to understand just how extraordinary his traveling companion truly was. The revelation came gradually, through small observations that accumulated into something much larger than he'd initially comprehended. It started with the navigation. Marcus had always prided himself on being a skilled pilot, but watching Zathara work was like observing poetry in motion. The Draknari would enter a meditative trance, his golden eyes unfocused as he reached out with senses Marcus couldn't even imagine. Then those massive claws would dance across the navigation console with impossible precision, plotting courses through hyperspace that cut travel time in half while avoiding the dangerous gravitational anomalies that plagued this sector. How do you do that? Marcus asked after Zathara had guided them safely through the treacherous Helix Nebula in record time. I feel the currents, Zathara replied simply. The way hyperspace flows around mass shadows, the places where reality grows thin. Your people use mathematics to approximate these paths, but we experience them directly. The more Marcus learned about Draknari abilities, the more he understood why other species had enslaved them. It wasn't just navigation. Zathara could predict stellar phenomena days in advance, sense the presence of other ships at impossible distances, and even detect the emotional states of crew members through some kind of empathic ability. Your species must have been incredible before, Marcus trailed off, not wanting to reopen painful wounds. Before the harvesting, Zathara finished quietly. Yes. We were explorers, scientists, artists. We mapped the galaxy long before most species had developed spaceflight, but our gifts made us valuable to others, and our peaceful nature made us vulnerable. The harvesting, Marcus learned, had been a systematic campaign of enslavement that had reduced the Draknari population from millions to mere thousands scattered across the galaxy. Most lived in captivity, forced to serve as navigators for criminal organizations, military fleets, and corporate expeditions. The Dominion was behind it, Zathara explained during one of their evening conversations. The Draknari had developed a habit of sharing stories while Marcus worked on ship maintenance, his presence somehow making the painful memories easier to bear. They convinced the other major powers that Draknari were too dangerous to remain free. They said we could see too much, know too much, that we posed a threat to galactic stability. Marcus paused in his welding to look up at his friend. Did you? Zathara's laugh was bitter. Perhaps. We could see the corruption in their governments, the lies they told their people. We could predict which star systems would rebel, which trade routes would become unprofitable, which leaders would fall from power. Truth is often inconvenient for those who profit from deception. The implications of this conversation stayed with Marcus for days. The galaxy he'd grown up in suddenly seemed much darker, built on foundations of systematic oppression and willful ignorance. Yet somehow, in the midst of this revelation, Zathara remained hopeful. You are different, the Draknari told him one evening as they watched a binary star system slowly rotate outside their viewport. Your species sees things differently. How so? Most beings, when they learn what I am, what I can do, they immediately think of how to use me, how to profit from my abilities. You have never asked me to navigate for profit or to use my gifts for your benefit. Marcus considered this. It was true that he'd never thought of Zathara as a resource to be exploited. The Draknari was his friend, his chosen family. The idea of using him felt fundamentally wrong. Maybe that's because humans are still learning about the galaxy, Marcus said. We haven't been out here long enough to become cynical about it. Perhaps, or perhaps it is something more fundamental about your nature. Their philosophical discussions were interrupted 3 days later when they detected a distress signal from a civilian transport under attack by pirates. Marcus's first instinct was to help, but he hesitated when he realized the danger he might be putting Zathara in. We don't have to get involved, he said. The ship's security forces can handle it. Zathara turned those golden eyes on him with an expression Marcus had learned to recognize as gentle amusement. You have already changed course toward the signal. Your hands moved to the controls before your mind finished processing the transmission. Marcus looked down at his hands, surprised to find them indeed adjusting their heading. I guess some things are just instinct. The pirate vessel was a modified freight hauler with illegal weapon upgrades, currently pummeling the shields of a passenger liner with civilian families aboard. The pirates were clearly positioning for a boarding action, which meant casualties were inevitable. They're too far away, Marcus muttered, studying the tactical display. By the time we reach them, it'll be over. Not necessarily, Zathara said quietly. I could get us there faster. Much faster. Marcus turned to stare at his companion. How much faster? Fast enough. But it would require me to reveal myself. Once I begin navigation at that level, every sensor array within 10 light years will detect the signature. The authorities, the Dominion, everyone will know there's a free Draknari in this sector. The weight of the decision settled on Marcus's shoulders. Helping those civilians would expose Zathara to recapture, potentially destroying the new life they'd built together. But doing nothing meant watching innocent people die when they had the power to prevent it. Marcus closed his eyes, hearing his father's voice. The measure of a person isn't what they can take, but what they choose to give. Do it, he said. What happened next redefined Marcus's understanding of what was possible. Zathara's consciousness seemed to expand beyond the confines of his physical body, reaching out into the quantum foam of hyperspace itself. The Wanderer's heart didn't just jump to faster than light travel, it folded space around itself, sliding through dimensions that existed between reality's foundations. They covered 27 light years in 18 seconds. The pirates never saw them coming. One moment their sensors showed empty space. The next moment, Marcus's ship materialized directly behind them, weapons charging. The surprise was complete, and the pirates' morale broke immediately. They fled without firing a shot, leaving the damaged civilian transport to limp toward the nearest space station. Incredible, Marcus breathed, staring at the sensor readings that showed their impossible journey. How did you... Emergency hyperspace fold, Zathara said, his voice weak from exhaustion. It is not recommended for regular use. The strain on space-time is considerable. Marcus realized that Zathara had quite literally bent reality to save those civilians. The Draknari had risked everything, his freedom, his safety, his very life, without hesitation, simply because Marcus had asked. But the consequences of their heroic action became apparent within hours. Long-range sensors began detecting incoming ships, lots of them, military vessels, corporate security, and more sinister signatures that Marcus didn't recognize, but Zathara identified with growing alarm. Dominion hunters, the Draknari said quietly. They specialize in recapturing escaped Draknari. They will not be reasoned with, and they will not be deterred. Marcus felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. How long do we have? Perhaps 12 hours before the fastest ships arrive. The full fleet will be here within a day. The smart thing to do would be to run. The Wanderer's heart was fast and well-equipped, and with Zathara's navigation skills, they could disappear into the outer rim and rebuild their lives somewhere far from Dominion influence. But Marcus found himself thinking about the families they'd just saved, about the look of hope that had returned to Zathara's eyes, about the conversations they'd shared about courage and choice. Running would keep them safe, but it would also mean abandoning any chance of making a real difference in the galaxy. There's another option, Marcus said slowly. We could contact the Free Traders Coalition. They've been fighting the Dominion for years. Zathara's head tilted in surprise. You would risk joining a rebellion for my sake? Not just for you, Marcus said firmly, for all the Draknari still in captivity, for everyone the Dominion has oppressed. You said yourself that your people could see the corruption in their system. Maybe it's time someone did something about it. The idea was audacious, possibly suicidal, but it felt right in a way that surprised Marcus. His entire life had been about moving forward, exploring new frontiers, taking risks that others wouldn't dare. This was just a bigger risk with higher stakes. Zathara was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus worried he'd overstepped some boundary. Then the Draknari did something he'd never done before. He reached out with one massive claw and gently touched Marcus's shoulder. In all my years, Zathara said softly, I have never met another being willing to sacrifice their safety for abstract principles. Most creatures fight only for themselves, their families, their immediate clan. You would fight for strangers you will never meet. Is that so unusual? It is uniquely human, Zathara said, and it may be exactly what the galaxy needs. The Free Traders Coalition responded to their transmission with skepticism that quickly turned to excitement when they understood what they were being offered. A free Draknari willing to fight alongside the resistance was unprecedented, especially one capable of the kind of navigation feats that Zathara had demonstrated. Captain Sarah Chen, no relation to Marcus despite the name, commanded the coalition frigate Liberty's Edge, and she was practical enough to recognize opportunity when it presented itself. "We've been fighting a guerrilla war for 3 years, she explained during their encrypted video conference. Hit-and-run attacks, disrupting supply lines, freeing slaves where we can. But we've never had the kind of tactical advantage that a Draknari navigator could provide. You could help us save thousands of lives." "And what about my friend's safety?" Marcus asked. "The Coalition doesn't exactly have a reputation for protecting its assets." Captain Chen's expression softened slightly. "I've read the reports about what you did at Kepler Station, about the sanctuary laws. You're not treating your companion as an asset, you're treating him as a person. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." The decision to join the Coalition wasn't made lightly. Marcus spent hours discussing it with Zathara, exploring every angle, every risk. The Draknari made it clear that the choice was ultimately Marcus's. As his guardian under the ancient laws, Marcus had the right to determine their path. "But what do you want?" Marcus finally asked. Zathara looked out at the stars, his golden eyes reflecting distant suns. "I want my people to be free. I want the young Draknari growing up in cages to experience what I have experienced with you: choice, friendship, the right to determine their own destiny. Then we fight." The Coalition rendezvous was set for the abandoned mining station in the Tau Ceti system. As they prepared to depart, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important. Their partnership had achieved things that should have been impossible. From his improvised nutrition synthesis to Zathara's reality-bending navigation. There was a synergy between them that went beyond simple friendship or mutual benefit. "Zathara," Marcus said as they entered hyperspace, "you said Draknari could sense things about other beings. What do you sense about me?" The question caught Zathara off guard. The Draknari was quiet for so long that Marcus began to think he wouldn't answer. "You are unusual," Zathara finally said. "Your species is young, but you carry something ancient within you, a potential that most humans never tap into. When you make decisions based on compassion rather than logic, when you choose to help despite personal cost, something changes in the quantum field around you. Reality becomes more malleable." Marcus frowned, not understanding. "What does that mean?" "I am not certain," Zathara admitted. "But I believe our partnership may be more significant than either of us realized. There are old prophecies, ancient Draknari texts that speak of a bond between species that could reshape the galaxy. I had always assumed they were metaphors. And now? Now I begin to wonder if we are living inside one of those prophecies." As the Wanderer's heart streaked through hyperspace toward their appointment with destiny, Marcus Chen found himself contemplating possibilities he'd never imagined. He'd started this journey as a simple salvager looking for scrap metal. Now he was apparently becoming a rebel, a guardian, and possibly something even more significant. The galaxy was about to change, and somehow he and Zathara were going to be at the center of that change. The only question was whether they were strong enough to survive what was coming, and whether their unlikely partnership could truly make a difference against forces that had oppressed the Draknari for centuries. Behind them, the Dominion fleet continued its pursuit, unaware that their quarry was no longer running. Ahead, the coalition waited with hope and desperation in equal measure. And somewhere in the space between, ancient forces began to stir, responding to a bond that shouldn't have been possible, but was somehow becoming the most important relationship in the galaxy. The coalition base at Tau Ceti was a hive of desperate activity when Marcus and Zathara arrived. Ships of every conceivable design filled the ancient mining platform's docking bays, while crew members from dozens of species worked alongside human refugees to prepare for what everyone knew would be their final stand against the Dominion. Captain Sarah Chen greeted them personally at the airlock, her weathered face showing both hope and skepticism in equal measure. Behind her stood a tall woman with prematurely silver hair and eyes that seemed to see too much. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the Coalition's chief xenobiologist and their leading expert on Draknari physiology. "Welcome to the revolution," Captain Chen said grimly. "Though I should warn you, you're arriving at what might be its end." The situation was worse than Marcus had imagined. The Dominion hadn't just sent hunters after Zathara. They'd mobilized 3 full battle fleets and were systematically destroying every coalition base they could find. The mining station at Tau Ceti was one of the last safe havens, and even it would fall within days once the Dominion fleet arrived. "We've got perhaps 48 hours, Dr. Vasquez explained as she led them through the base's cramped corridors. "After that, we'll be forced to scatter to the outer rim and hope the Dominion loses interest." "What about the Draknari slaves?" Zathara asked, speaking for the first time since their arrival. Dr. Vasquez's expression grew pained. "We've rescued maybe 300 over the past 3 years. There are still thousands in captivity across the galaxy. If the coalition falls—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Without the resistance movement, the remaining Draknari would spend the rest of their lives in chains. That evening, as Marcus sat in the observation lounge watching ships arrive with more refugees, Dr. Vasquez approached him with a troubled expression. "I need to ask you about your relationship with Zathara," she said without preamble. "We've been monitoring the quantum signatures from your ship, and what we're seeing shouldn't be possible." Marcus turned to face her fully. "What do you mean?" "Draknari navigation abilities are well documented. They can sense hyperspace currents, predict gravitational anomalies, plot efficient courses through space-time. But what Zathara did to reach those civilians, that emergency fold, required power levels that no biological creature should be able to generate. Maybe you don't understand Draknari abilities as well as you think." Dr. Vasquez shook her head. "I've studied them for 20 years. I know their limits. What Zathara accomplished was impossible unless—" She paused, studying Marcus intently. "Unless he had help. Specifically, unless he was somehow channeling power from an external source." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of external source?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out. We need to run some tests, on both of you." The tests began the following morning in Dr. Vasquez's laboratory, a cramped space filled with jury-rigged equipment salvaged from a dozen different scientific installations. Marcus submitted to blood samples, neural scans, and genetic analysis, while Zathara underwent similar examinations in an adjacent chamber designed to accommodate his massive frame. The results were unprecedented. "I don't understand how this is possible," Dr. Vasquez muttered, staring at the data scrolling across her screens. "Marcus, your genetic structure shows markers that shouldn't exist in modern humans. There are dormant sequences, inactive neural pathways, cellular structures that appear to be designed for abilities that humans never developed." "What kind of abilities?" "Psychic resonance, quantum field manipulation, consciousness bridging. It's as if your species was meant to evolve these traits but somehow never did." She turned to another screen showing Zathara's readings. And Zathara's neural activity is off the charts. His natural abilities are being amplified by a factor of 10 when you're nearby. Marcus stared at the data, pieces of a puzzle he'd never known existed beginning to fall into place. The prophecies Zathara mentioned, what did they say exactly? Dr. Vasquez pulled up another file, this one containing ancient Draknari text that had been painstakingly translated over decades. They speak of a bonding between species, a partnership that would awaken dormant gifts in both races. The Flamebearer and the Starwalker, two beings whose connection would forge a new path for the galaxy. You think Marcus and Zathara are these prophetic figures? Captain Chen asked, entering the laboratory with the expression of barely contained excitement. I think, Dr. Vasquez said carefully, that we may have just discovered why humans are so dangerous to the Dominion's established order. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. You're saying humans aren't just random latecomers to galactic civilization. We're meant to be here, meant to form these partnerships. It would explain a lot, Dr. Vasquez said. Why human traders are so successful in Draknari space, why your species adapts so quickly to alien environments, why you form emotional bonds across species lines more readily than any other race we've encountered. Zathara's voice came through the intercom from the adjacent chamber. The ancient texts speak of humans as the Awakeners, a species that would arrive in the galaxy's darkest hour to unlock abilities that had been dormant for millions of years. The implications were staggering. If the prophecies were accurate, then Marcus and Zathara's partnership wasn't just a friendship, it was the beginning of a fundamental transformation in galactic civilization. But they would need to survive the next 24 hours to see that transformation begin. The Dominion fleet arrived ahead of schedule, emerging from hyperspace in a formation that spoke of overwhelming confidence. 3 dreadnoughts, a dozen heavy cruisers, and more support vessels than the Coalition's sensors could accurately count. They're not here to negotiate, Captain Chen announced grimly. Full planetary blockade formation. They intend to destroy everything. Marcus found himself in the Coalition's command center, watching as their modest fleet of 30-odd ships prepared to face impossible odds. The plan was desperate in its simplicity. Hold the line long enough for the civilian transports to escape, then scatter to predetermined rally points and hope to rebuild elsewhere. It was a plan born of courage and desperation, but it was ultimately a plan for honorable defeat. There has to be another way, Marcus said, studying the tactical display. Something they won't expect. Zathara, who had been silent since the fleet's arrival, suddenly lifted his massive head. There is, but it would require us to fully embrace what we are becoming. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her instruments. The quantum resonance between you two has been growing stronger since yesterday. If you could somehow amplify it, what would that do? Captain Chen asked. I'm not certain, Zathara admitted. The prophecies speak of abilities that transcend normal space-time limitations, but attempting such a thing could kill us both, or worse. It could tear a hole in reality itself. Marcus looked out at the approaching Dominion fleet, then at the Coalition ships preparing to make their last stand, then at the readouts showing Zathara's amplified abilities when they worked together. The choice seemed obvious. What do you need me to do? The process was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. He and Zathara positioned themselves in the center of the command center, their hands, human and Draknari, touching, while Dr. Vasquez monitored their vital signs. The connection that had been growing between them for weeks suddenly blazed into full awareness. Marcus felt his consciousness expand beyond the boundaries of his physical body, merging with Zathara's vast perception of space-time. Through the Draknari senses, he could see the quantum foam that underlaid reality, the invisible currents that connected every star system, every living being, every possibility that might exist. And in that expanded awareness, he discovered something incredible. The Dominion fleet wasn't just a military force, it was a wound in the fabric of space itself. Their ships were powered by enslaved Draknari, forced to bend space-time against their will, creating tears in reality that would eventually destroy the galaxy if left unchecked. "I can see them," Marcus whispered, his voice seeming to come from everywhere at once. "The Draknari on their ships. They're in agony." "Can you help them?" Zathara asked, his mental voice joining with Marcus's in harmonious unity. Together, they reached out across space with abilities that should not have been possible. Where before Zathara had been limited to sensing local space-time currents, the partnership with Marcus allowed him to project his consciousness across vast distances. And where Marcus had been just an ordinary human, his connection with Zathara awakened dormant neural pathways that let him serve as an anchor for abilities beyond imagination. The effect on the Dominion fleet was immediate and devastating. Every enslaved Draknari on every ship suddenly found themselves free of their neural restraints, their spirits lifted by the hope that flowed from Marcus and Zathara's bond. But more than that, they found themselves connected to a network of consciousness that spanned space itself, a network that allowed them to coordinate as no military force had ever coordinated before. On the Dominion flagship, Admiral Vex was studying the Coalition's pathetic fleet when every system on his bridge began failing simultaneously. Not through enemy action, but through what appeared to be spontaneous mechanical breakdown. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "all ships are reporting the same problem. It's as if our Draknari navigators have stopped cooperating." On every Dominion vessel, the enslaved Draknari were doing exactly that. Guided by the consciousness network that Marcus and Zathara had created, they were systematically sabotaging their own ships while simultaneously beginning to navigate the vessels away from the battle. But the most shocking transformation was happening on the Coalition ships themselves. Human crew members found themselves thinking with unprecedented clarity, making tactical decisions with supernatural precision. Alien refugees discovered abilities they'd never known they possessed. And throughout the fleet, a sense of unity and purpose spread that transcended species barriers. "What's happening?" Captain Chen breathed, watching as her tactical displays showed impossible maneuvers being executed perfectly by crews who shouldn't have been capable of such coordination. "Evolution," Dr. Vasquez whispered, staring at readings that defied every scientific principle she'd ever studied. "We're witnessing the birth of a new form of consciousness." The battle that should have been a massacre became something else entirely. Instead of destroying the Coalition fleet, the Dominion forces found themselves paralyzed and then systematically dismantled by their own former slaves. Ship after ship surrendered as their Draknari navigators took control and joined the growing network of liberated consciousness. By the end of the day, the Dominion's three-fleet armada had been transformed into the galaxy's largest liberation force, with thousands of freed Draknari serving as willing partners to crews from dozens of species. Admiral Vex, now a prisoner on his own flagship, demanded an explanation from the human who had somehow orchestrated this impossible defeat. "How?" he asked when Marcus and Zathara were brought before him. "How did you turn our greatest strength against us?" Marcus, still feeling the afterglow of his expanded consciousness, smiled sadly at the Dominion officer. "You never understood what Draknari really are. They're not tools to be used. They're people with hopes and dreams and the capacity for friendship. When you enslave someone who can navigate space-time itself, you're not just committing a crime, you're damaging the fundamental structure of reality." "The universe is built on connections," Zathara added, his golden eyes bright with possibilities Marcus was only beginning to understand. "Between stars, between worlds, between living beings, humans have the gift of forming those connections naturally. Draknari have the gift of making them manifest in physical reality. Together we can heal the wounds that slavery and oppression have torn in space-time itself." In the weeks that followed, the galaxy watched in amazement as the phenomenon spread. Wherever humans and Draknari worked together in true partnership, impossible things began to happen. Dead worlds bloomed with life, broken civilizations rediscovered hope, and the rigid hierarchies that had dominated galactic politics for millennia began to crumble. The Dominion, faced with system-wide revolts led by human Draknari partnerships, sued for peace and agreed to release all remaining slaves in exchange for amnesty. The coalition grew from a ragtag rebellion to a galactic movement dedicated to fostering cooperation between species. And at the center of it all, a former salvager and his Draknari companion continued their journey through the stars, no longer searching for scrap metal, but helping to build bridges between worlds that had never known peace. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked one evening as they watched a newly liberated world celebrate its first free elections in centuries. "Giving up your simple life to become a prophetic figure?" Zathara's laugh was warm with contentment. "I was never meant for a simple life. None of us are. The universe is too vast, too full of possibilities, for anyone to be content with smallness." Marcus nodded, understanding flooding through their shared consciousness. The heartbroken dragon he'd found in that abandoned space station had indeed been the most significant discovery of his life, not because of the power Zathara possessed, but because of the friendship they'd built and the future they'd unlocked together. The twist, it turned out, wasn't about ancient prophecies or hidden abilities. It was about something much simpler and much more profound: the recognition that every being in the universe, no matter how different, deserved kindness, respect, and the chance to choose their own path. And sometimes, when that recognition was shared between species, it could literally transform the galaxy.